You're impressing her, you're apologising, both. $14.99.
Sorry, 15 quid. Saying 15 quid for some... This is going to die within a week.
Yeah, but that is the beauty of cut flowers, my friend.
What, they're cut so they'll die within a week?
Well, exactly. But that sweet moment of bloom before they die, that all too brief blossoming vibrance, that celebration of life.
Are you doing Shakespeare again?
Devspeare.
The talk of the street.
Talk of the street.
The talk of the street.
Talk of the street.
The talk of the street.
Talk of the street.
The talk of the street.
Talk of the street.
Hello and welcome to episode 340 of The Talk of the Street, an unofficial Coronation Street catch-up podcast that thinks that in amongst all the drama and the trauma and the tragedy, the one thing that we can cling on to as a positive this week is that at some point we were the number one TV review podcast in New Zealand. I'm Gavin.
And I'm quite pleased to see a picture of Martha P. Johnson on the wall of Sean's flat. I just kind of wish that she wasn't stuck behind that door that's always open in the back.
Oh, that was longer than mine.
Yeah.
Pithy.
Yes.
How are you this week?
I'm good. Oh, well,
Are you?
I'm not good today. I'm kind of under the weather today. I stayed
Oh,
home
no.
from work. I stayed home from work and read my Matthew Perry book and then watched Maleficent and X-Men Apocalypse.
What a day. What a day.
And then got Coronation Street watched early so that I was in the end waiting for you. Because I was supposed to
weren't
the other
that
way
early.
around.
You weren't that early.
I was earlier than I typically am.
You were watching the last episode as I was writing notes for the last episode.
And then like 2 hours later, here we are.
Here we are indeed.
Yes. How are you this week?
Yeah, I'm alright. I've been very busy at work.
Yes, you've had to go in early a couple of days,
I
which
was
is
in
heinous.
before 7 o'clock in the morning.
I know. What is that?
And there at 4:30 a couple of days.
Ugh.
It's been busy.
Yeah, I stayed late at work yesterday getting this.
Oh, we're back to talking about you again.
Get this auction done.
Oh.
It goes up Sunday.
Do you know what? I don't think I'm going to hit that button now. Okay, I will. Oh, stop.
Yeah, I'm quite excited. And not just because of the...
So my work anyway has been fairly busy doing the end of year reporting
Right.
for the big bosses.
Yes. Well, I've been cataloguing Prince posters.
Well, I've been given, Gavin, crunch me some numbers, see? And so I go away and I crunch some numbers. And then they'll say, no, we don't want actually crunched numbers. We want something that we can read. So I have to go back and do it all over again.
Yes.
Then can we get this in plum? And then I had to explain how rounding works. Which apparently isn't common across the world, rounding.
It should be.
You would think.
Yeah.
So let me give you a couple of examples.
Okay.
If you were to round to the nearest whole number,
Uh-huh.
2.2, where would you round it to?
At 2.
What about 3.9?
4.
What about 3.5?
Now, see, that's a toughie.
Is it?
It could go either way.
Can it?
I would go 4.
What about 4.5?
I would go 5.
Aha, and that is where we differ. I was always taught for a 0.5, you round to the nearest even number. So 3.5 goes up to 4, 4.5 goes down to 4.
How does that work?
That was the law as far as I was concerned.
How is...
And as far as how does it work, I think I've explained it.
Sure. You think this is more interesting than me talking about Prince posters?
Well, it's just that I was talking about it before you interrupted me. But sure, I'll go for a little nap. You talk about Prince posters.
No, the mood is past.
Oh dear. We'll have to wait until next week to get closure on the Prince poster
But I was,
anecdote.
but I was, I worked until like 4 to get it done so that I could stay home today because I was already starting to feel poorly yesterday. And the auction needed to get done by the end of the day today. So by the end of the day yesterday, we were up to 493 lots. So my coworkers only needed to do 7 lots today to get that done. And they did. I'm so proud of them.
How do you round numbers, dear listener? Do you round up and down to an even number? Or do you always round up? That's our hard debate for this week.
And also, how do you feel about a poster of Prince in the process of taking off his shirt, where you can see not just his chest hair,
Some of his balls here.
well, not the balls, but the upper pubis, and that does nothing for you, which is fine.
No,
That's the way I like you.
not even a little bit.
I also don't find what's her name hot, so it evens out.
Who?
Your what's her name from the band that does the Walk Like the Egyptian song?
You don't find Susanna Hoffs hot?
No.
Yeah, you do. Shall we preamble, my dear?
Yes, please.
Give us some of that deluding yourself, Corrie News. I saw an interesting little clip of Anna Kendrick, another one of my faves.
Yes.
And I think she was doing like a Q&A to an audience, and somebody in the audience said, "You're on my boyfriend's list, by the way."
Uh-huh.
And she said, "Am I on your list?" to the woman. And she said, "You could be." That was a fun little bit. And then they talked about lists,
Right. Yes.
which would match our other podcast.
Yes. Yes. The List of Lists podcast, which we haven't done yet this week, even though we were
We'll do
doubly
it tomorrow.
prepared. Anyway, back to Corrie News.
Yes, I hit the button and everything.
Yes. Sydney Martin, a.k.a. Betsy, stood up for fellow young soap star Jahin Rasool Chowdhury of EastEnders after Lord Sugar made terrible remarks about him on social media,
Lord Sugar, a.k.a. Grandpa Simpson.
a.k.a. the other rotund, inflamed billionaire who looks kind of orange, who has terrible racist thoughts about people.
I don't know that he's a billionaire. I'm sure he's obviously a millionaire.
Yeah, I don't think Trump is a billionaire either. I think he's just a millionaire. I think it's just Elon Musk and
Zuckerberg.
Zuck and
Bezos.
yeah, and
And that guy that owns Zara, somehow.
right, and the guy with glasses.
The guy with glasses.
Yes, who does the windows?
Susanna Hoffs?
Guy with glasses who does the windows. Not Steve Jobs,
Who
the other
does the
one.
windows?
You know who I'm talking about.
I know that you're not talking about house windows.
No.
I know that now. You're talking about Mr. Bill Gates,
Yes, I am talking about Mr. Bill Gates.
not C.R. Smith. It's probably only a Glasgow joke. That.
Yes. All of them have very, very nice ex-wives who give billions of dollars to other people. Anyway,
Yeah, well done, Sydney.
yeah, well done, Sydney. That's Evelyn off and poor Mason, and reportedly next to say farewell to the Cobbles are Charlotte Jordan, Sue Cleaver, and Colson Smith, aka Daisy, Eileen, and Craig. And also Dylan, who I found out about after I'd written this.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
Well, that one's news to me.
yeah,
I normally find out things when I'm on the toilet.
yeah. You're not
But
on the
here I
toilet
am,
now.
I'm doing a podcast.
Well, it's just
Unless
like
it's my nightmare and I'm
It's-
doing the toilet on a podcast.
it's just like world leaders are supposed to die while you're on the toilet. But then Jimmy Carter had to go and die when you were not on the toilet, when Stelly was on the toilet.
So somebody's on the toilet.
There's
It's when
always somebody on the toilet.
when you see the haze of Febreze coming out of the bathroom door, you know somebody important has died.
Yes. It's like when they have a new pope.
That's what I was going for.
Now, some of these are people who I think see the writing on the wall and don't want to get canned, so they are leaving first initially. I don't think they knew that Charlotte Jordan was going to say ta-ra, because if they did, they wouldn't have built this whole huge
Well, sure.
love quadrangle storyline and made her pregnant.
She's a young woman.
Yes.
Very popular on the show.
Yes.
Amongst quite a lot of people.
Yes, I'm totally gutted. She's one of my favorites.
And definitely, I think, is doing what is expected. You do a few years on Corrie, then you go off and do something else. She's probably been on the show longer than maybe she would have anticipated. Maybe COVID played a part in that. But yeah, I mean, I think she was always going to be a short-term thing on the show. I think the timing is kind of incredible. Colson Smith has a very mature view on the whole thing that he expressed on the Sofa Cinema Club podcast. It's not called that anymore.
Oh, you still listen to that?
No, I saw a clip of it on Instagram.
Oh, okay.
And he was very pragmatic about the whole thing.
He seems to be doing a lot of stuff outside of Corrie already anyway. So I definitely think he is landing on his feet. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Sue Cleaver's like, you know what? I've been on the show for 25 years. I'm hitting 60. It's time for me to go do other stuff.
Yeah,
I don't want to be stuck here for the rest of my life.
This is the whole Dame Maureen Lipman thing.
Right, exactly.
You want to be doing things while you're able. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to blame any of them.
No.
I wish them all the very, very best in future endeavours, of course.
Of course.
I mean, as much as I make fun of Tinker,
right,
and as much as I hate Daniel,
right. Well, he's not leaving.
No, but I would miss both of them because you need somebody to rub against the wrong way, or somebody to rub you up the wrong way.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the kind of the fun part of the character.
Yeah.
Is that I don't like Daniel, but I really would miss him if he wasn't on the show.
Right, because then you'd only have 2 people to hate instead of 3.
Right.
Some faces that will be sticking around are Ken, Sally, and Kev, as William Roach, Sally Divener, and Michael Lavelle were all signed new contracts for another year on the cobbles. So, you know, the old faces are still going to be there. And by old, I mean have been on the show a long time, not necessarily aged.
Right.
Except, of course, in William Roach's case, because he is aged.
Yes.
He will do the show until he is dead.
Looks like it.
Yeah.
And you know, why not?
Why not? You're comfortable. You are already, you know, the Guinness World Record holder of person on a soap opera the longest ever.
Yeah, that window to go off and do the boy band, I think, is closed.
Yes.
So you might as well. Might as well hang about. And if it's something that you enjoy and it still gives you pleasure, then
yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Indeed.
Of course, why not?
Yes. At this rate, you know, it'll just be Ken and Audrey and Rita and Sally and Kev. I hate Kev though. That's the problem.
Again, you need somebody to hate.
That's true. I really hated him this week.
Oh, we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yes, we will. And that's Corrie News.
That's Corrie News. Well, let's move on then to...
So are you happy because it wasn't just all about people leaving? Because I know that you didn't want it to be all just about the people leaving.
Oh, no, I would have found it very funny if you hadn't mentioned any of it. That's what I was kind of hoping for.
Yeah.
For in this week where, like, 7 people announced that they're going to leave or whatever.
Right.
You mentioned instead something that Catherine Tildesley said about a bakery.
Right.
That would have made me laugh.
Yeah. That's only for when there aren't like 12 people leaving the show.
Yeah.
Those are those weeks.
All right.
It's when we talk about bakeries. We're still following that bakery, by the way.
It's the only people we follow on Facebook. Because every time I log in, I was like, why are there pictures of cakes on the Talk of the Street wall on Facebook?
Because they're delightful cakes.
They are. They seem good people.
Yes.
Anyway, let's move on to our feedback section that I like to call Everyone's a Critic. Lindsay writes in, "Hi Gavin, Helen, I'm fairly new to the podcast, but absolutely love listening every week.
Aww.
You guys are amazing." I'm maybe putting the emphasis on that.
On the amazing part?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Your shock at Shona only being 13 when she had Clayton, I think you have missed something there. It was always common knowledge that she was a teenage mum, but maybe not quite specific about what age exactly. 12 is crazy. I do enjoy Helen's hate for Bethany and Daniel. I feel it. Keep up the good work, guys. Going to start listening to the list of lists too.
Oh, delightful.
Very good. Thank you very much. Lindsay, it's interesting that she picks up on your hatred of Bethany and
Right,
Daniel.
I was going to say, you also hate Bethany and Daniel.
Maybe a little more so. Not that it's a competition.
I think you hate Bethany more than I hate Bethany. I think we're about even when it comes to Daniel.
Okay. Then Stephen writes, amazing how far Mason has come since the days of not this wee prick again. Interestingly, it's been about a year since we were at peak not this wee prick again.
True.
That was when he was pulling knives on people.
Instead of having knives stuck in him.
Oh, do you really want to say that right now?
I think that ship has sailed, hasn't it?
I like keeping a little bit of air of mystery, though.
Sure.
I keep thinking about what Corrie would be like if it were an American soap. For one thing, I think they would have Kit be Paul and Gemma's long-lost triplet so they could have it, so that they could have cast Peter Ash and have their cake and eat it too with killing off Paul. The other idea, because Daniel sucks, would be a Daniel-Sarah affair that she gets pregnant,
Whoa.
which
Whoa.
is the worst possible storyline I can imagine. And a repeat of one from the classic The Bold and the Beautiful.
Yes, there are not enough space aliens and chimpanzees in Coronation Street to be an American soap.
Talking of which, are we going to see Better Man this week?
Yes, that and The Last Showgirl.
What about The Brutalist?
That is not out yet.
Excellent. Then Michelle on YouTube writes, any chance Cassie's high beam teeth are blinding people to her machinations? I think maybe so. Thank you for your cosy, fun insights.
Oh,
Thank you very much, Michelle. Fiona B writes, surely the American Robbie Williams equivalent in terms of someone massive over there but relatively unknown here, a question that we asked last week, because that's obviously got something to do with Coronation Street, is/was Toby Keith, who I haven't heard of.
yeah. And I feel like Robbie Williams is less racist than Toby Keith was. Robbie Williams never sang about putting his boot in the ass of Muslim people.
Oh, is that what Toby Keith did?
Yes.
In what context?
Well, it was right after 9/11.
Oh, okay. I don't know that excuses anything, but
No.
I understand it more now.
Right. Yeah. He's one of those.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
He has a very specific following, or he had, because he's dead now.
Oh, that wouldn't happen in a small town.
Yeah, that's not that guy.
Oh, no.
No, that guy is still unfortunately alive.
Not that we're wishing anybody dead.
No,
I feel
of
like we're
course
going
not.
down a little bit of a cul-de-sac here. Let's reverse
Focus.
up. Let's reverse up
Focus.
and get out of this. Sharon writes, hi, Emily and Ernest. Oh my God, you could have knocked me down with a feather. I did not expect that. Poor Mason. It was really sad. I'd really come to like him in the past few months. Not like racist Kelly. Still can't take to heart.
I'm glad we're not the only ones.
I know. Wasn't it a great episode? Absolutely brilliant acting by all of these young actors. Elsewhere, lucky Evelyn got into university within 3 days of applying and on the course she wanted to. Anyhow, just checking in with you two great guys from Sharon, who's British, not racist. Thank you very much, Sharon.
Unlike Toby Keith, who is dead.
God rest his soul.
And also not British.
And finally, Cheeky writes, by my reckoning, that's 6 characters leaving or have left the show. Gail just left, and then there's Eileen, Craig, Mason, Debbie, not to mention basically Evelyn, and finally Daisy. And then let's add Dylan to that as well, which, like I said, was news to me. Thank you so much to Cheeky, to Sharon, to Fiona B, to Michelle, Stephen, and Lindsay for writing in this week. We very much appreciate it. Feedback is always welcome. Send us your thoughts, and I will probably read them out. Get us at thetalkofthestreet@gmail.com, or our DMs are open at Corrie Podcast, or we love it when people write actual letters to us. Send us your proper mail to the Talk of the Street, P.O. Box 12, Eaton Rapids, Michigan 48827. Please note that we reserve the right to edit feedback, but only in the interests of brevity. And that reminds me, what with my very, very busy week at work, I haven't had a chance to check the P.O. Box again. Must do that tomorrow.
Yes.
And now we'll podcast for coffee. We're drinking our own coffees this week.
What?
I had a pink grapefruit juice for the first time today.
Oh,
It is delicious.
yes. That's what I'm drinking right now.
I'll be getting stuck into that. That's lovely.
And it's good for your liver.
It's very refreshing.
Yes.
Anyway, the Talk of the Street is and will always be free on your podcast provider and on the YouTubes. But if you think a show is worth anything more than the time it takes to listen to it, and if you want to show your appreciation, you can buy us next week's coffee by going to ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com/the Talk of the Street. You You can also sign up to be a friend of the podcast through the same link, where for as little as $2 a month you can get a mention in the closing credits of each and every episode. And we now have a Patreon site where you can also show us some love. Sign up to be a friend of the podcast there at patreon.com/thetalkofthestreet. But remember, you can always support the podcast for free and get us in front of new listeners by liking, subscribing, rating and reviewing wherever you get your podcasts. Alright, well, that about wraps it up for another week then.
Yes.
Oh no, there's one or two things that we need to talk about.
Oh, okay.
Shall we dive in, my dear?
Yes, please.
Our first storyline this week is Mason's departure.
Dum dum dum.
On Monday, Mason is at Dylan's, confident that his brothers will be locked up, which will give him time to vamoosh to Germany.
Yes.
See, I'm saying vamoosh, which I
Yes.
think is Italian,
Instead of vamos.
and Germany, which is definitely not Italian. His flight is in 6 hours. It's just a shame that he's going to be leaving on such a sour note with Betsy. So after coaxing from Dylan, he goes to get her flowers from Dev's. But Dev wants 15 quid for a poxy bunch of blooms that'll be dead inside a week. That sweet bloom though, says Dev. Foreshadowing much?
Yes. Dev was very Dev this week.
I rated him later on at 140% Dev.
Correct.
Mason says he's off in a bit and leaves without buying the flowers, and he goes to the community garden, and it looks like he's about to nick the flowers that have been left there for Seb. But when he reads the card, he thinks twice, and he goes to take a sprig of heather instead. But Abby sees him doing that, and she still goes fucking rage at him. But it's calmed somewhat when Mason finds out who she is and tells her that he knows all about Seb, and they talk about him at assembly each year, which reminded me that Mason's apparently still at school, or still of school age.
Yes.
He apologises, not for the first time, and slinks off to the factory where he doesn't work. And he offers the heather to Betsy, but she doesn't think that heather is going to make up for him killing her mother, which was a bit extreme.
Yes, because he didn't do that.
Right, he says he's not his brother's, and that's why he has to leave. He's going for good and doesn't expect forgiveness, but he is sorry, and Betsy is unmoved. Privately, Sally thinks that Betsy was a little bit harsh there. On the street, he announces to a passing Gary, Maria and Liam that he's leaving. Gary's chuffed, and Mason asks to have a word with Liam.
And Maria appears to have stolen Stelly's green coat, from which she was that character from the Lorax for Halloween.
That's a very specific joke, even for me. I'm not even sure that I get it 100%.
The Onceler.
That doesn't help me. He asks to have a word with Liam, tells him that he's sorry, although he knows that it's not good enough, and Liam nods and just goes back to his family. Back at number 4, he tells Tim and Sally about his day, and particularly Abby, and how he misses his own mum. So it's back to the precinct, where he gets Dylan to look out while he intends on breaking back into his brother's flat to get something of his mother's.
A shoebox of pictures.
Shoebox of pictures, there we go. Dylan goes back home for a second and seems to let his gaze linger on a vent in his wall, but soon he rejoins Mason, and as they head to the flat, Ant and Dec appear, released due to lack of evidence.
They had that very, very specific World War II helmet that had the name in it and everything. How is that lack of evidence?
I don't know that it's lack of evidence that can be used, but maybe it's not enough to hold them for any length of time.
It's ridiculous,
I don't know,
is
it
what
doesn't
it
seem
is.
to make sense, but the plot is very thankful that this has happened.
Right, yes, and other things will not make sense later, so it's fine.
They push Dylan aside and chase Mason down the ginnel, where they proceed to kick the fuck out of him. And then oddly, we see Dylan run out of the ginnel, and we're like, wait a minute. They pushed Dylan to the ground. Mm-hmm. How did he get down to the ginnel? And this is the first clue that, oops, we're messing about with the timeline a little bit here.
A little, yes.
Because next we see Mason is sitting in the playground of the precinct, nursing a bit of jam that's on his face, and he's limping a bit because he jumped from the outside balcony. And Betsy comes along in a better mood and concerned about the tanking that he's taken from his brothers. They share a bit of chat and head off for a coffee as Abby hangs around the ginnel and shoots some evils. And Nina rolls, he sees Maria and tells her again that he's leaving. And again, I'm thinking, well, you've already told her this.
Right, yes, and also, she's still wearing that green coat.
Don't tell the joke again. And he explains that he's been beaten up by Ant and Dec. Shona is quick to bark at him about getting Dylan involved in this. So just to avoid the hassle, he leaves just as Abby comes in. You all right? She asks. Back at number 4 again, Sally tends to his wounds and tells him that he did the right thing by trying to make amends with people. Mason could never understand why folk were nice to him. He understands better why people hate him. And then he gets a call from Liam, who he still has listed as Rat on his phone, and they arrange to meet back at the precinct. And I kind of thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah.
That he's... Because he looked so...
embarrassed
and ashamed that he hadn't changed the name from Rat. So when it came up, and he just explains it to him very quickly, I never got around to changing the name. There, on the swings, Liam explains the effect that bullying had on him, how he has a panic attack every time he gets a notification, and it's never in the past for him. He knows Mason is sorry, but he will never forget what happened. But at least he's alive. And Liam leaves and is replaced by Dylan, who asks if he's okay, and Mason is curious why people keep on asking him that. Then Tim arrives in his cab and it's time for him to go. Mason tells Dylan that he's sorry that he felt that he couldn't get rid of it, whatever that is, and then limps into the cab where, whoops, it isn't Tim who's driving, it's Abby. You all right? She asks. And then we see Mason still sitting in the precinct, but this time in much worse shape than he looked before, and he's been stabbed it looks like he's been stabbed in the side. As Mason repeats in voiceover how he's sorry and he couldn't get rid of it, we see Dylan in the past storing something in the vent in his flat, something that he returned to today, and it was a zombie knife that he picked up for protection. I thought it was the same zombie knife that Mason had threatened Liam with, but
Yes.
apparently we learned later that it wasn't. It was one that he ordered separately.
Yes, but it does seem that Mason believes that it is the same zombie knife.
As Mason was getting beaten up in the ginnel, Dylan arrived and brandished the knife at Ant and Dec, but was quickly overpowered. And as Dylan ran, Mason was stabbed in the confusion by Ant. In voiceover, Mason warns against bringing a knife to a fight. People die. And then Abby finds him in the playground. You all right? She asks. But Mason is very much not all right.
No.
And is bleeding out.
Yes.
So this whole part, the second part of Monday's episode, was almost like a fantasy in Mason's head.
Yeah.
Of stuff that didn't happen but might have.
Yeah. I didn't like it. I thought it was gimmicky and takes away from the shock of what happened to him. What actually happened to him, because you have all of this stuff in between the act of him getting stabbed and us finding out that he was stabbed. You know what I'm saying?
Kinda. For me, I think it added to the impact a little bit because it looked like he was going to be fine. So you know that he's got a kick in. It looks like he's going to be fine. And then he isn't. So I got a surprise that he was fine, and then I got a surprise that he wasn't.
Yeah, I think part of my problem is the fact that I watched it today and I already knew that I already knew the outcome because, the show posts it like 5 minutes after the episode's over.
Yes. The problem that I had with this, because I did have a problem with it, was I wasn't entirely sure whose point of view it was at all times.
Right.
And it surprised me then, knowing now that what happened after the stabbing in the second part of the episode didn't happen. That means that he didn't have that conversation with Liam.
Right.
So that means that he imagined Liam talking about not being able to
forgive him
and not being able to not panic when his phone vibrates and all that stuff, which seemed very personal to Liam.
Yes.
And not necessarily something that Mason would be aware of or privy to. And although Mason's very much more in touch with his feelings and the consequences of his actions, I thought it was maybe asking a little bit too much to expect us to think that he would dream up this whole story for how Liam was affected by his actions.
Right.
So So yeah, I didn't think it was perfect, and I would probably have lived without it, but it did give me that added little surprise. Oh, he really did get seriously injured after all. So Abby calls for help, does what she can, and eventually calls Mason an ambulance. Mason,
You're an ambulance.
you're an ambulance. That's still funny.
Yeah.
And she tries to keep Mason conscious. Gary arrives on the scene and helps, but even he's shocked by the amount of blood. Mason thinks that he's going to die. Meanwhile, Asha is working on the ambulances, but she's on the other side of town, called to a cardiac arrest that turns out to have been a hoax. And she's instructed now to get to the precinct where there's been a stabbing. Back at the flat, Dylan is frantic with worry, and then he sees the commotion outside and rushes to them as the ambulance siren rings in the distance. Mason tries to give Abby the heather back. Oh, that really got me.
Yes.
And says that he's sorry. Dylan announces it was his brothers, Ant and Dec, who had done this. Abby is sure everything will be all right.
It's Swain.
So at the police station, Swain is hacking furious to learn that Ant and Dec have been released, but then she's double concerned when she sees details of the stabbing at the precinct, so she and Kit dash to the scene. Swain's suddenly worried about Betsy, because that's where Betsy hangs out. Betsy, though, has just arrived at the precinct and is shocked to see Mason. Asha and the paramedics arrive and take control of the situation, doing their best to stop the bleeding. Gary calls Maria, who's in the pub, so now everyone knows about the stabbing. Kev, David, Shona and Sean. Swain arrives and comforts Betsy as Mason is loaded into the ambulance, and Betsy and Abby go along with him. In the ambulance, Mason says that he wants his mum. And this is obviously a bit too close to home for Abby,
Yes.
who must now be thinking, this is probably what went through Seb's head.
Right, yes.
Yeah, when he says that he wants his mum.
Yeah. Oof.
Oh, they know how to get you in the feels.
They do.
At the hospital, Mason is rushed to a room as Betsy tells him that he's nothing like his brothers. In the crash room, though, as Asha is running through the notes of his vitals to the A&E crew, Mason goes into cardiac arrest and dies.
Yeah.
Oh,
What?
Oh, fucking hell, what?
What? What the fuck is this?
Now, the show had foreshadowed this quite a bit.
Right, that there would be a stabbing.
Well, it's always bad when someone says that they're off for a fresh start. That's just asking for trouble.
Hmm.
And then with all the I'm leaving for good and all that
Right.
sort of stuff.
And I have to leave before they kill me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he died.
Yeah.
And I was so sad about it.
Yeah. So was I.
I don't know that I cried exactly, but I felt that I came close to it when I was thinking about it later.
I was a bit weepy.
I think this is testament to how well this character has been written in the past
Yeah.
few months, because as I'm sure everyone is feeling, we hated him. Oh my God, did we hate him?
Yes, we did.
But to turn
And
it
his
around,
stupid face. And now I'm going to miss his stupid face.
I was looking forward to seeing where this character was going to go.
Right. Yeah. Because they spent so much time and effort to properly rehabilitate him.
Some
And
could argue rehabilitated him a little too well.
right. And in a way in which he became close to a number of people on the street, to where you felt like he was going to be a part of their lives and their stories, and then this.
He was like the son that Sally and Tim never had.
Exactly.
And he fitted into that family
well.
dynamic really, really perfectly.
So well.
Luca Tulin has done a great job.
He has.
As this. And on both sides of it, to be the threatening asshole prick that he was,
Yeah.
and to be the coward that he was back then, if you remember, he was
Yeah.
always very one who would jump on someone for being a grass, but he was always the first person to grass somebody else up.
Right.
So he was a hypocrite coward
Right.
and a thug,
Yeah.
and he was brilliant in that role.
Yeah.
And then when he comes back and he's softened, and he's looking for redemption,
Yes.
looking to turn his life
Actively.
around. And he did that so well as well.
Yeah.
That's such a loss to the show. And I know that people complain that there are far too many young actors in the show, and it's kind of like Grange Hill a little bit. And I can maybe agree with that to some extent. But when
You need
when they
younger
get
actors.
but when they get it right, as they did with Mason's character, I feel really robbed. And apparently they told him about this last year.
Yeah.
So he knew the trajectory of the character
Yes.
for a while.
Yeah. Well, at least for a few weeks, because
That
it's
was like
only.
last March, I think they told him.
Oh, really? That far back? Mm-hmm. That's very interesting.
And that he was going to be part of a knifing storyline. What I did like about it, and it's not something that I like. Like is the wrong word. But what I thought was satisfying about the storyline and the arc that the story took was Mason was threatening people with a knife. Mm-hmm. In the end, it's a knife that takes him.
Right.
There's a kind of...
There's an arc
There's
there.
a poetic irony, I guess, to that. And that's... I thought that it was the same knife as well, which
Right.
made it doubly ironic.
Right. And that's what it should have. Let's be honest. That's what should have happened.
When I was looking at it in Dylan's hand, though, I was sure that it had a green handle.
Yeah.
It really stood out. Horrible, horrible things make my blood go cold. And I do like that this is something... What I think they're doing well is highlighting this as a scourge on society, and the scourge on British society probably more than it is here, because
We have guns here.
we have more efficient ways of killing our youth. That knife crime is horrible. People do carry knives that they're perhaps taking with no intention of using, that they end up using.
Right.
If you don't have a knife, you can't use it. If
Right.
you have a knife, then there's a chance that you can. And
Right.
it's
And then if you have a knife, the other guy is more likely to have a knife because he knows you have a knife.
a bigger knife.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah. We haven't gotten to...
we'll
Yeah.
get to it.
Yeah.
Fade to white. It's Asha who goes out to tell Abby and Betsy that Mason didn't make it. Betsy breaks down and throws herself into Abby's arms, who can't hug her back because her hands are covered in blood.
Yes.
And that really got me as well.
Yes. Oofed.
Swain arrives, sees what happened, and nearly loses it, but quickly composes herself, telling Betsy that it wasn't her fault and she'll get the people who did it. And that scene as well I thought was excellent. Swain comes in, and for a second she's a mother before she's a police officer.
Yes.
But she takes a deep breath, she wipes the tears away, she's back to being DS Swain again.
Correct.
Sean rushes home, relieved to find Dylan safe and alive, but Dylan is harbouring the most important detail, that he was the one who took the knife, instead blaming himself for leaving. Sean says that they need to tell the police what happened, but then they get a call from Abby, who tells them that Mason didn't make it. And Dylan breaking down was incredibly moving as well.
Yes.
Kev arrives, and the distraught Abby tells them that they need to tell Jack about what happens when you carry a knife. People die. Abby goes to get on the phone to Tim and Stu, but as she's explaining about how she tried to help and how there's so much blood, she breaks down.
Yes. And then Kev's like, you don't need to call them. Fuck them.
Will I get a chippy? Kev, there's a time and a place, man.
A
Seriously.
time and a place.
At speed dial, Gary's having a crisis of conscience, like we all did. He wanted to kill Mason for the longest time. He never forgave him for what he did, but then he saw him lying there in a pool of his blood. Then Liam comes in and Maria tells him about the stabbing, but then Yasmin appears and she's got further news that she learned from Stu, that Mason is dead.
She's like, I might as well be the one to tell you before you hear it on the news. Yeah, Mason's dead. And
We're very careful not to say Mason's dead, though. We say Mason didn't make it.
yeah, Mason's dead.
We euphemize it a
Yeah,
bit.
which is tacky.
At number 4, a distraught Sally and Tim are consoling each other, wondering why someone would carry a knife, why people don't realise what happens, how many lives are lost. What a waste, says Tim, and he thinks of the family, the friends, the people who cared. It's the people living in fear. It's the nothingness of it all. They're just kids and they're dying. And then we see Abby looking at a photo of Seb, Sean and Dylan going to the police station, and then back home, Sean finds the bag that held a knife, and in it there's a school photo of Dylan and Mason, and now Sean breaks down. And that's as far as we get with that.
And here is where the show lost me, when it became a public service announcement as told by Tim in words that Tim would never use.
Tim would never talk like this. That's my fault with that.
Does not talk like this. And also, when Tim starts talking like this, you're like, wait a second. Why is he not talking about this very specific child who he befriended, who they took care of, and how sad the loss of this very specific kid is? We lose Mason in the public service announcement. Mm-hmm. It becomes more about the show telling the public how bad knives are and losing the character that we have come to care about who just died because of a knife.
Yeah.
That really irritated me.
I liked a huge amount of what they did on Monday. And I thought Monday's episode, by and large, was among probably the best that I've seen Corrie be in recent memory. I absolutely agree, though, about the monologue. And I don't know what it is with Corrie and monologues.
Yeah.
Gail's monologue after Aidan, the much-lauded monologue, the much-lauded award-winning monologue that I never liked.
But see, that one I did.
Wait. But I have grown to like when I watch it out of context, on its own, just that scene. When I see just that scene, I kind of like it.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about Tim's monologue. It was handled the same way. You hear him, he's in voiceover. You see other people going about their day. They're following very much the Corrie model for monologue delivery. But my main issue with it, and my main issue with Abby saying, we need to tell Jack never to carry a knife because people die.
Right, yeah.
Which is true.
Yes.
And it's absolutely important information, but it's important information later.
Right.
Like the next day.
Yes.
And I felt the same way about Tim's.
Yes.
Tim doesn't speak like this.
Right, yes. Whereas Gail at least was believable that she would say those words in that context. I felt Gail was much more believable than Tim. And also,
I think it's close.
Gail was the words that Gail was saying was within context of her fears for David and thinking that David would die by suicide as well. Mm-hmm. You know, whereas there's, you feel like Tim's is very, very much removed from the person that Sally is crying about in that scene.
Tim is a narrator.
Right.
Rather than a character as he's saying it.
Right. Yes. Mason is removed from the context and it becomes just a public service announcement. And that irritated me.
Yeah. It becomes less about isn't it terrible that Mason's been stabbed to death to isn't it terrible that knife crime is such a blight on society.
Correct.
Which is true. And nobody's arguing with that.
No.
But it felt too soon and it felt the wrong words for Tim to say. But
also let the work speak for itself.
Because it was great.
Because the work says knives are dangerous and knives are bad and knives kill people.
You just look at Mason sitting up against the wall in that playground holding on to him. Everyone's saying about how much blood there is. Everyone's shocked by how much blood there is.
Right.
Is shocking enough. This is like, just in case you didn't notice.
Right, yes.
Knife crime is really bad.
Yes. And then the next day in the police station, there's a new poster on the wall saying knives kill people. It's like, enough. You don't have to go this hard. Trust your audience.
Trust the audience.
Trust your audience to get the message. If you want to have this speech, you know, you have social media, Coronation Street, where you can write it out and say, Mason's story has affected everybody, and this is why, and then write the whole monologue out for people to read, and then give a phone number of where you can go if you need to speak to someone about knives.
The sad thing about it is the people that need to see this don't watch Coronation Street.
Correct. I know people complain about how many young characters are on the show, but if you want young people to watch shows like Coronation Street, you kind of have to keep those young people around and not kill them off.
Just to reiterate, I thought so much of this was done exceptionally well. Mm-hmm. Mason, after being stabbed, is just eerily good how he is, and the way that it's shot is fantastic as well. What I liked, what's borne out through the rest of the week, though, it's something that I think the show has been lacking, and something that I called out for in my blog post last week, was more community stories.
Yes.
Here we see it's Asha. Good. It's Asha that's the paramedic. That's
Right.
great, because now Asha and Dev
Are
and
part of
Bernie
the
are
story.
all involved in it as well. There's a hoax call element that we'll get to. That brings more characters in.
Right.
There are so many people,
Abby's
regulars.
the one who finds him, so
She's
that
the hero
brings,
again. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which we'll talk about that a little later as well.
But there's so many people that are touched by this, even on Monday, and it kind of spreads out through the rest of the week. I thought that was excellent.
Yeah, and it was really nice because it made you realize how far Mason's impact spread. You know, how many people, his brief time on the show, he was a part of,
Right.
which I thought was very well done.
Agreed. Just not so much on the nose, maybe.
Yes.
All right, we'll move on then to our next storyline, which doesn't really have all that much to do with this, but it's Karla's kidney collection.
Oh, we're not going to talk about the other stuff related to Mason?
We're going to come back to that.
Oh, okay.
So on Wednesday, it's pissing down with rain as Betsy leaves a teddy bear at the precinct, the internationally accepted symbol for grief. And it's the only sign that anything has happened there. Meanwhile, after speaking with the cops, Betsy tells Swain that she wishes she'd never got involved with Ant and Dec. And Swain's like, yeah, what?
Yeah.
So now Betsy has to admit what happened with the factory robbery. And
What you talking about, Betsy?
Swain is fucking furious.
Well, yeah.
Worried about what Carla will say, and so Betsy now throws Carla under the bus by saying, well, she already knew. Roy and Bobby
Bobby! Phone!
are visiting Carla. She hasn't heard if the kidney damage is permanent, and Bobby offers up his, but Carla doesn't want it, which means that she'd rather die. Bobby, it looks like he's thinking, or has shot himself. Swain comes
Or
in
both.
and demands to know, I'm thinking, have I just shot myself? Swain comes in and demands to know what Carla was playing at, covering for Betsy. Carla, who had a bleed on the brain a couple of weeks ago and now needs a kidney transplant, probably, explains that she was just trying to protect Betsy and keep her out of trouble, and gives Swain one last thing to think about. She apologises. Swain calms down and kisses Carla's pow, so that's that sorted. Later, Bobby hates Carla because she's keeping her Later, Bobby must hate Carla because he's keeping her company while he reads her Chit Chat magazine. But then he goes off when he receives a very important phone call. I wonder who that's from. Swain and Betsy are having dinner at the bistro. Betsy thinks Swain must hate her for what she did. Swain can't ignore what happened, and she's going to have to go to the cop shop tomorrow to grass up Ant and Dec.
But she doesn't hate her. She's her mum. She loves her.
Right. And we don't see her going to the cop shop tomorrow to grass up Ant and Dec, which is a shame, because we maybe should have. On Friday, at the hospital, Bobby is eating all of Carla's jelly babies now when a nurse comes in to tell her that the tests suggest that her kidneys are fucked right enough and she's going to need a new one, maybe even 3 or 4. It's that bad. Bobby, though, has some plans to fix this and he slinks off to the prison set. Meanwhile, we learn that Betsy has been let off for her involvement in the robbery, which seems weird. Why has she been let off for this?
Because her mom's a cop.
But she did something really bad here.
Right, yeah. I think she's getting a slap on the wrist. She's getting like a citation or something, right?
I don't know.
So, also, Karla now doesn't want Ryan's kidney as well.
Oh, I haven't got to that bit yet.
Oh, okay.
Swain and Betsy learn about Carla's
It's been burned by acid.
Swain and Betsy learn about Carla's situation, so Swain heads to the hospital while Betsy and Nina go off to lay some flowers. At the hospital, Carla and Swain talk about how Helen got it wrong last week, and Carla really does have Aidan's kidney, which she gave when he was terribly depressed. She tells Swain that the kidney is all she has left of Aidan, and she let him down, and she tells her about Aidan taking his own life.
Which is incredibly sad, because then you stop and think, well, wait a second. Carla's also lost her dad, and her selfish sister is never, ever coming back to the show.
Okay. So selfish.
I did remember it. So selfish. So selfish, she refuses to come back to the show to give Carla a kidney.
Bobby, meanwhile...
Nobody's even thinking about asking Kate for a kidney. She doesn't even come up.
No,
it's hilarious.
Because we'd rather get Bobby meeting his dad, Rob Donovan, in prison.
Yes.
So we get that happening.
Yes.
Rob is pissed that Bobby doesn't come to visit anymore because Bobby used to light up his days.
Right.
Are you okay, Rob? Are you okay, man? Do you need to talk to somebody? Bobby doesn't visit anymore and tells him the importance of family. Well, that's handy, says Bobby, because if that's the case, then you really should give one of your kidneys to Carla. Rob tells him to suck his balls and goes back to his cell. It's clear that Rob still doesn't feel any remorse for killing OG Tina.
Right, yes, and says that it was self-defense.
It was self-defence that I twatted her over the head with that iron bar after pushing her off scaffolding.
Right, yes. This wee woman who was shorter than me.
While all this is going on, Betsy and Nina compare notes on murdered boyfriends at the precinct, and Nina advises that grief doesn't shrink, more that you grow around it. Back at Carla's,
Which
though,
is the common thing that people say now, and have those jars, that meme with the jars and the balls in the jars, and how the jars get bigger but the balls stay the same size.
do you know what I really think is wrong with society?
Memes.
Too many people know the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Right.
And crediting it to
Einstein,
Einstein, who never said it.
Right. Yeah. You think that's what's wrong with society?
That's the worst thing about society.
That's the worst thing about society, really.
That, and because the quote, I think, originally comes from a Narcotics Anonymous pamphlet.
Right, which Einstein obviously wrote.
Sure. That and people attributing every positive, good vibes quote to Marilyn Monroe also annoys me.
Or Lincoln.
The two big hitters.
Yes, Marilyn and Lincoln.
On the quote circuit.
Yes.
Fucking hate that. Anyway.
Anyway. Have you still not seen The Angry Goose yet?
No. Back at Carla's, though, Bobby gets a call from Rob. He's had a change of heart and will consider giving Carla another kidney, but asks him to visit later to discuss properly. Ryan reckons Carla will be hacking furious when she finds out about this.
Right, yeah. But,
And that's just probably good about that this week.
you know, I think she'll be less furious with this than... I think she'd rather take it from her no-good brother than from Bobby or Ryan.
Yeah.
Because Bobby and Ryan kind of need their kidneys.
And she likes them more.
Right, yeah. Whereas, you know, her no-good brother's going to die in prison, so you might as well take a little bit of him before he does that.
So I'm wondering whether this is leading to a Rob gets out of prison early storyline.
He killed someone.
Yeah. But he's also going to do something really nice and give his kidney up, I guess. I also think, though, that he only wants Bobby to go back to the prison so he's got another visitor. There's a part of me that thinks that's why he wants Bobby to go back, and they'll just delay it and delay it and delay it.
Or maybe he'll do it. He'll have to leave the prison to go to the hospital to do it, and then he'll he'll escape from the hospital.
No.
And go on the run.
No. No
and
more
kidnap Bobby.
breaking your own hand to get out of prison and then overtake the prison hospital escort thing. Like Harvey did, remember?
Yeah.
In an episode of Coronation Street where he put on a ice hockey mask.
Right, yes. And also had a floating gun.
Oh yes, you do remember that episode.
I do remember the floating gun. Yes, I will never forget or forgive the floating gun. At least the knife thing is believable. So maybe they've heard all of our complaints saying, come on, you're not in America. There's no way all these people are constantly getting their hands on
And
guns.
funnily enough, a knife would float.
Yeah, probably. Depending upon what the handle's made of.
Plastic, I think, isn't it?
Not always.
On the zombie knife? I think so. It looks plastic. It was green.
Or resin. Or
It's all right just to agree with me.
rubber.
You can just agree with me.
Glass.
You can just agree with me. It's
Or
fine.
some other form of metal.
We won't get letters. It's fine.
Or bone.
No, I quite like this. I do feel that it's again a shame that the necessity for a kidney transplant is getting thrust into the Carla Swain relationship at this early stage.
Were you infuriated by Swain going to the hospital to yell at Carla, who's lying in a hospital bed with her kidney dying?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it because she'd also had her brain cut open 2 weeks ago.
Right. Yeah.
And she'd still be recovering from that.
Right. Right. Which is how she got the sepsis, which is what's killing her kidney.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. But Swain feels like she's obligated to march into that hospital room and start yelling at Carla, dying in a hospital bed. It's like, do you see those tubes going into her arms? They actually did the tubes in the arms thing, which they didn't do the last time somebody had a head wound. Which was, I don't even remember who it was. Was it Adam again? Yes, it was Adam again.
Adam did have a headwind. Yep.
Yes, when he fell down the stairs.
Headwind. After me.
Because David pushed him down the stairs. So they're being really serious here. I don't even think Roy had tubes in his hands when he had a heart attack.
I can't remember. I don't really notice these things, but
But here's Carla with tubes in her hands, and Swain's yelling at her about something that happened months ago. It's like, read the room, woman.
telling you, she's a little bit autistic, I think.
She's somewhere on the spectrum. Somewhere. We'll never know.
All right, we'll move on to Cowardly Dylan again. Remember when Dylan was cowardly? Yeah, it's cowardly again.
Yeah. Monday.
On Wednesday, Kit has pulled an all-nighter working on the witness statements and tells Tinker that he's going to speak to Betsy again. He's determined to get Ant on deck. Then he gets a call. The knife has been found.
Dum dum dum.
At Sean's flat, news of the discovered knife has travelled fast. Dylan clams up at this, and after some not-so-gentle probing from Sean, Dylan reveals that it was his knife. Sean is fucking furious, thinking that he hasn't learned a single thing. Dylan says lots of kids carry knives. Yes, says Sean, and then people die. He worries that it was Dylan who stabbed Mason, and Dylan is, for some reason, appalled at the suggestion, even though it's kind of an obvious conclusion to jump to, because
Right.
Dylan and Mason weren't friendly as far as most people know.
Right, yes.
Dylan explains what happened, and Sean wants him to tell the cops, but Dylan has a better idea. Let's run away. Sean thinks it's a dreadful idea, but tells him to wait until he goes to get some cash from the machine. But instead, he goes to the cop shop and grasses Dylan up, and Kit comes in to arrest him for carrying a blade. In the interview room, Kit has the same considerations as Sean and wonders why he didn't come forward in the first place, and maybe he was the one what stabbed Mason, given their history. Dylan insists that they were mates now, and explains exactly what happened about the knife, about the scuffle, and how cowardly Dylan did a runner and didn't actually see the stabbing. Dylan is treated like a suspect in the murder inquiry and has admitted to carrying a dangerous weapon and reckons that he's looking at jail time for that, and no one disagrees.
Nope.
There's also a nice little bit here where Sean, who I think has been excellent through this storyline,
Yes.
talks about Spectrum games that he played when he was a kid.
Yeah.
That took me back.
I bet it did.
I also had Jet Set Willy
Of course you did.
and Manic Miner.
Yes.
I would have quite happily talked about Spectrum games for 5 or 10 minutes there.
Aw.
On Friday, in Nina's roles, Sean approaches Adam for representation for Dylan, which seems weird because Alia's firm are the ones that are representing Ant and Dec. Sean makes Dylan's case and Adam agrees to it. So at their flat,
But reluctantly.
yeah, he doesn't really want anything to do with it.
Right, yes.
And everyone gets stuck into him for earning a crust.
Right, yeah. They dig at him for being a oh, lawyers don't turn money down for anything.
And
sort
Sean's
of.
like, you're not helping here. So at the flat, Adam listens to Dylan's story and worries that without witnesses, it's going to be kind of easy for Ant and Dec to cast doubt that maybe Dylan was the one what stabbed Mason after all.
Yes, especially if his fingerprints are on that knife.
Yep. And that's as far as we get with that this week. Cowardly Dylan.
He's going to move back in with his mom in London.
London?
London.
Yeah, it's looking like it. That seems to be the easiest way to deal with all this, isn't it?
Yeah.
And probably you'd want to get away
Yeah.
after all this.
Yeah.
He was. Him and Mason, after everything,
They were kind of friendly.
they were cool with each other, definitely. And I think they were friends. I don't think Mason really had anyone much closer to him,
Betsy.
apart from Betsy.
Yeah. And then, Stu and Tim.
Stu was really upset.
Stu was really upset.
Didn't come back, though, but really
No.
upset.
Yes. Was going to give the kid a job. Mm-hmm. Wanted the kid to move in. Maybe he'll come back for the funeral. Do you think they're going to have a funeral? Is it going to be like that guy that died that had the...
Robert,
Yes.
that
Thank
guy
you.
that died there was all I needed.
Michelle's, thing with the white hair.
Robert, we've
Yeah.
established this, yeah.
Who impregnated Irish Tina. Remember Irish Tina?
Oh,
Man, I miss her.
what about Scottish Vicky?
Not so much.
I don't actually remember who that was.
She was so brief. We had high hopes. We gave her a nickname and then she was off the show in a week.
To be fair, we were looking for someone to give that nickname to. Yeah, I thought Sean was excellent in this. And it really shows you that when you give someone a really meaty bit story to deal with, knock it out the park.
Yeah.
His whole range of emotions, from the disappointment to the anger to the fear, and then trying to be the best parent that he can be, and realising that he's kind of let Dylan down in the past and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
I thought he did a fantastic job. As did Dylan,
Yeah.
has to be said. I think everyone was really on their A game.
Yes.
But the dynamic between those two was interesting. Dylan really hating Sean for grassing him up, but
Right.
then later on
Recognising-
Friday saying, you're not so bad after all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The fact that he believed that Sean was going to go get money and then they were going to go on the lam together, though.
Yeah, he's not the smartest. Let's move on to what Dev threw yonder window breaks.
It is the east and Bernie is the sun.
Just as Marilyn Monroe wrote it. On Wednesday, at the cafe, Joseph comes in for a hot chocolate, but overhears Asha telling Dev that Mason might have survived if it hadn't been for the hoax call that delayed them getting to the scene. Joseph shits himself.
Is there only one ambulance in Weatherfield?
Well, they're all stretched so thin. So this I absolutely believe. Credit to the lad, though, because he goes straight to the cop shop and confesses to Kit that he was the one what
Uncle
made
Kit.
the hoax call. It's his fault. And Kit is carrying a mug that says, "The most awesome
Police officer,
police officer," or
in the
something,
world.
something along those lines.
Yes. And for a second there, it's like, how does he know this child's name? And then it's like, oh, right, he's his uncle.
Yeah, I went through that as well.
It's like later on when we see Chesney sitting at a table with a very strange looking woman who we've never seen before in our life. And then you realize it's Gemma.
We'll get to that.
Yes, we will.
In the interview room, Kit explains the consequences of hoax calls. Joseph is sorry, says he acted alone and didn't know why he did it. Kit tells him that he won't be going to jail, but he has to tell his folks. But it's Tinker who takes Joseph home and explains what happened. Chesney is furious, and even Gemma's wig is taken aback. They put a fucking bow on it this week, did you notice?
She had a barrette made of pencils. It was a barrette made of colored pencils. Like she's some preschool teacher. Why does Gemma own a barrette of pencils? Has she gone through Miss Frizzle's closet and stolen all of her accessories?
I thought it was a bow. Was that the pink thing that I was seeing?
It was a barrette of pencils.
Oh, there was maybe a bow.
Maybe there was also a bow on Wednesday and the pencils were Friday. But
Tinker's-
still.
Tinker says he'll leave them to it. And so that's what he does. Tinker's good at saying that.
Yes. Well, I'll leave you to it as you berate your son who's going through a crisis, because that's what I do.
It doesn't take long for Chesney to work out that Hope was behind this, so storms off to shout at Fizz and Ty for a bit.
Yes.
With Gemma's wig falling on at the back. So leaving Joseph then in charge of the quads. So Chesney shouts at them outside the garage and are passing Kev and Abby hear what happened. Kev is disgusted, but ignores the fact that Mason is dead and wonders if anyone's ever spared a thought for Abby. My hero, says no one.
Yeah.
In Nina's roles, Bernie thinks that Joseph did a bad thing, but isn't to blame for what happened. Joseph says that's not what Asha thinks, and she's right, it is his fault.
Yeah.
This doesn't stop Bernie from going to the Rovers to speak to Asha and tell her that her comments have upset Joseph about the hoax. This is news to Asha, and
Yes, who was not speaking to Joseph at the time.
thinks that it was Joseph's fault. Bernie doesn't think he meant any harm, so Asha has to explain in fairly blunt terms that hoax calls stretch the resources of the NHS even thinner, that Joseph and Hope knew what they were doing and they knew it was wrong, and a kid died, and maybe the paramedics could have helped if they hadn't have done that. Bernie winds her neck in a bit and gets wired into the vodka. Later, Tyrone and Chesney drag Joseph and Hope to apologise to Kev and Abby. Like, why are they apologising to Kev and Abby?
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Why are these the injured parties here? All right, so Abby helped.
Right.
And obviously
is
is
traumatized
by
because
it.
of Seb.
But if you're going to apologise to anyone...
Apologize to Betsy.
Right. But no, this is what we do to the kids.
Right.
We drag them round to the house where they've done something, get them to apologise to the adults that are there, and then that's supposedly everything okay.
Right, yeah.
Abby accepts the apology, but says it won't bring Seb back, and politely asks everyone to fuck off.
Right, and then not until everybody looks at her quizzically and she says, oh no, I meant Mason.
Hope doesn't know who Seb was. She should, though.
She should, yeah. She absolutely should.
Kev looks worried, or hungry.
Or both.
Back in the pub, Dev speaks to Bernie about all this, but fails to see Bernie's point, explaining that what Joseph did absolutely had an impact on the outcome.
Right, and just because he's 13 is no excuse.
Right. And then Tim and Sally come over, and Sally makes Bernie absolutely clear on what she thinks about the scumbag Joseph. Bernie wanted Dev's support there, but he kind of agrees with Sally.
Right, because let's all remember, Asha is his daughter.
Yeah. On Friday, Nina's Rolls, Dev is trying to judge the water with Bernie. Chesney and Gemma's wig don't want them falling out because of them. Bernie calls it an ideological difference in opinion because Joseph was only 13. She thinks that makes everything different.
Right,
and then, to be fair, Kev comes in and says, well, that's kids for you.
Right, yes.
Despite the fact that he was furious the day before.
Right, and also, again, Mason is nothing to Kev. So how Kev feels about it...
It's irrelevant.
Yes, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I did like? After Asha gives Bernie a dressing down when Bernie goes to the bar and Glinda asks, what do you have? And she says, lemonade and vodka.
Big one.
Big one. And she says, massive.
Mahusive. Mm-hmm.
Yes, that was good. And I thought at that point that Bernie realized that she was in the wrong here.
No.
Unfortunately, that's not correct.
And I understand Bernie as a grandmother, but you're not doing the kid any help here.
And also, she's done this sort of thing before where somebody in her family does something wrong and she tries to talk it away. Mm-hmm. This is par for the course for her.
So Joseph has been let off with a youth caution. But Dev and Bernie soon make up, with Bernie admitting that Asha has been through hell but needs to forgive Joseph. They talk about their lovely blended family. Dev wants to take it to the next level, but remembers the knockback that he got a few months ago. Bernie is ready to be asked again though, so when Dev asks her to marry him, she happily agrees. They go to Chesney's to break the great news to him and Gemma's wig, but before they can make their announcement, Chesney opens up his bereavement dividend cheque.
Yes.
That's come through the mail.
Yes.
20 grand. So he and Gemma's wig head off to the pub, leaving the kids with Dev and Bernie.
You don't mind, do you?
Who get pished and snuggle.
Right, with the kids.
And that's as far as we get
with the kids in the house, yes. The way grandparents are treated in this show, honestly.
Bernie was so infuriating during these scenes.
Yes. Until the end.
Because while you can maybe understand it, it's a horrendous take to announce.
Right.
To people who were there.
Yeah.
And people who probably know that all this could have been avoided if there hadn't been a hoax call or it could have been better handled.
Right.
I don't think anyone's saying that Mason would have survived,
Right.
he probably had a better chance.
And then the whole, well, he's only 13 and, they didn't mean any harm. It's, you hear shit like that all the time by people who want to excuse bad things their children have done. And
Right.
it's like, shut up.
It doesn't stop the fact,
That somebody died.
right, there's
There are
bad behaviour and
consequences.
there's consequences.
Yes, exactly.
But Dev and Bernie are engaged to be wed then.
Yeah.
Remember when they were a kind of comedy couple
Yeah.
that Dev was almost embarrassed that he was getting his hole off of Bernie?
Right. I'd rather Bernie hook up with Yasmin. So like the two people who are actually lesbians on the show get to be lesbians on the show. But,
Oh, it'll
That's
be a
just
few
me.
years before that can happen. You can only have,
straight people playing lesbians on the show.
and you can only have one character discovering their sexuality fairly late in life.
At a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no room for two of them.
Right.
But
Or,
like,
people discovering their sexuality and being comfortable in their sexuality from the very beginning. Coming into the show just being comfortable with being.
that's practically unheard of.
Yes, unless they're heterosexual, and then it's fine.
Or gay men.
Well, only Billy.
I think Paul was always fairly comfortable.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, remember James, though? I'm not gay.
You had a voice and everything. Good times. No, I'm quite happy for Dev and Bernie.
Yeah.
I think that wedding will be one to watch.
Yes. Yes. I'm trying to imagine what Bernie's wedding dress is going to be and how it's going to outshine Gemma's orange.
How orange can it be?
Well, no, I don't think it'll be orange. I think it'll be more rainbowy and flowy and hippy dippy is what I'm imagining. Dev.
One can only imagine Gemma's wig for that. We'll move on to Life's Too Short for This Pish. On Wednesday, Evelyn is chatting to Roy about her disdain for magic realism. Oh well. She
Yes.
also gets her itinerary for the law course, and who would have thunk that it's actually quite demanding. She's worried about how she's going to find the time for this when Tyrone comes in and asks her to pick up the kids from school and then fucks off before she can say no.
Yeah.
She does a grandmotherly pickup and is trying to make sense of her timetable when Hope comes in wanting to show off her TikToks. Fuck off, Hope, says Evelyn. She's busy. Later, she goes to Roy and explains how she has no time to scratch her arse these days with her responsibilities. Roy thinks if she's going to give herself a chance of succeeding, she needs to reconsider her living arrangements. Evelyn sucks a thoughtful tooth at this and goes home to tell Ty, fuck y'all, I'm moving into the halls of residence, where she intends on developing a feud with the crusty dean. Smell you later. It's like that episode of The Simpsons where Homer was a national treasure of British stage and screen and wanted to go off and do something different while he still has the time.
Yeah. Or like Rodney Dangerfield in Back to School.
That's exactly it. Look, damn you, crusty dean. On Friday...
I'm just a little disappointed that she didn't take that as a hint that Roy wants her to move in with him again, where he'd be nice and quiet and they could cuddle and
think
talk
that's what he
about
was
William,
hinting at?
or not William Carlos Williams, Gabriel Garcia.
Marquez.
Yes.
No, not Marquez.
Yeah. It's 1,000 Years of Solitude that they were talking about. Yeah, I think it is Marquez, which is apparently now a show on Netflix.
It's Marquez.
Yeah. I've read that book. It starts with him remembering the time he first experienced ice.
I've read his short story, A Very Old Man with Enormous Wings, which was turned into a song by one Susanna Hoffs.
Who's not hot.
Yeah, you're right. On Friday, Nina's Rolls, Evelyn has checked out the halls of residence and she's moving in today. So within a week of applying, she's been accepted and now has a place in the halls. Dev comes in and Evelyn immediately hands in her notice, which makes Dev go 140% Dev.
Yes.
That's loyalty with nothing! She goes home to pack, seemingly in a rush to get the fuck out of Dodge, but she is touched when Tyrone and Fizz make a fuss about her. Roy comes over to say goodbye and in a roundabout way says that he'll miss her. He warns her about the dangers of beer pong, but they arrange to meet up for a farewell drink later. So in the pub, Evelyn credits Roy for planting the seed for her improvement. Then Cassie announces that her taxi is here.
Yes, and
that's
apparently her neighbor is named Barb, who does yoga in the nude in the common room.
Yeah, a psychology major, would you believe?
Absolutely.
Well, that's Evelyn out.
Yeah, but she's only just up the street. She's only just up the street at university. The same university Amy goes to that we see Amy all the time. So,
Is it the same
probably.
uni? Well, our interview was in town, wasn't it?
Right,
So-
yeah. It was just right up. And she says, it's not like I'm immigrating. I'll just be up the street.
I will just never be in the cafe for the next
Right.
few months.
I'll just be very busy with school. And then we'll occasionally drop in to, pet the dog and be snarky and then leave again.
You can't blame Dame Maureen Lipman.
Right. She's Dame fucking Maureen Lipman, for Christ's sake.
Right. But it does leave a fairly substantial hole in the
But I
comedy
like that.
department for Coronation Street.
Yeah.
Because her and Roy and her and Tyrone and her and Fizz,
And her and Cassie.
she's just so good and such an important bond in that house
Yeah.
that without her, she leaves a very, very big gap.
Yes.
And it's
But
and
not
it's-
like that.
And it's a shame. And I'm just skipping over what you're saying now.
Yes. I'm just really, really sad that she and Roy never got it on.
I think it's better that they don't. I like how it's always hinted at and suggested at. I honestly didn't think twice about that Roy perhaps was planting seeds for her to move in with him.
Yeah.
But if that was what they were doing,
Yeah.
that's kind of sweet
Yeah.
and unrequited
Yeah.
in terms of drama.
Right.
It's always better than once it becomes a thing and
Right.
accepted, as we've seen God knows how many times. So
And-
between these two at a certain age,
Yeah.
I think it works even better.
And they still share joint custody of a dog. So,
They do.
That
Who,
was
who
that was
for a
rather
while I thought was called Frankie, and I thought that's going to be confusing.
because of the baby Frankie. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but his name's not Frankie.
No, it's Freddie.
Freddie. Yes,
Yeah.
Freddie, who was very intent on trying to get one of those little milk
Seriously.
candies.
Desperate
That
for
dog was just begging for it.
it, but not like that.
No.
Our penultimate storyline tonight is Ant and Dec's Freshco's car park takeaway.
Yeah, what the fuck?
On Friday, Sarah
When
dropped...
I'm wanted for murder, the first thing I do is drive down to Family Fare and pick up some ground beef.
Get some of those yellow label bargains. They're not going to be there all day. On Friday, Sarah drops in at number 8, and it seems that the stabbing has brought some issues back to the front between Shona and David. Shona suggests to David that they go out for dinner, but nothing she suggests seems to meet with his approval. So
Yeah, and David is rightly terrified of Ant and Dec. Let's not forget.
yeah,
Yeah, because like in the stabby scene, like they find out about it just as they've let Lily go outside with money to go buy milk. And then they're like, wait a second, there are two stabby people who hate David on the lam now with a knife.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we shouldn't send our child out onto the street,
right. Yeah, I forgot to mention any of that.
which I thought was very effective as well.
So Shona goes off to Freshco's while Sarah tells David that if he keeps this up, he's going to lose Shona. In the Freshco's car park, Shona ends up parked next to Ant and Dec. She discreetly gets on the phone to Kit, who's talking to Sarah at the time, and Kit rushes off just as David comes out, wondering why Shona was speaking to Kit. So he goes flying off in Sarah's car. He doesn't have to put the seat back.
And doesn't listen to his sister. She's like, oh, what's he on about? He's like, he was just talking to Shona, and that's all David needs to hear. Mm-hmm. And Sarah's like, no, not like that. Let me tell you why. And no, David doesn't want to listen because David is now an asshole 100% of the time.
So when David gets to the car park, without having to adjust the mirror, he screams at Kit to stay away from his wife, and this is all the distraction that Ant and Dec need to make their escape.
Right, and this is what alerts Ant and Dec to the fact that
Kit's
Kit is there in the first place.
Right. Kit manages to get Dec quite quickly, though, and arrest him for Moida. Back at the station, Logan is still AWOL, but Shona finds out that Ant and Dec seem to know that it was her who grassed them up.
Which doesn't stop, Kit catches Dec, but that doesn't stop Dec from saying, calling Shona, a nosy, grassy bitch. which is how Kit knows that Deck knows that it was Shona who grassed him up.
So they must have seen her when she was in the car?
Well, they saw her. They saw her with David and Kit.
Oh, yeah. She did. Yeah, that's true. Because they didn't look at her in the car.
No. And then they got out of the car to go into Freshco to, buy some oatmeal, I guess.
Get some toilet roll. And there was a really good deal on barbecue items because it's winter and they're trying to get rid of that stuff from last year.
Yes. What are they doing there? And they're being very suspicious because they both have their hoods of their black hoodies up.
Mm-hmm. They're not wearing balaclavas though, thankfully.
No. They just, look like clan members who have been in the sun too long.
Just like Ant and Deck.
Yes.
And number 8, Kit doesn't think Ant will try anything. David's a bit of an asshole to him and does his best to wind Kit up about being tall and handsome and stuff. And when Kit offers an olive branch to put all of this behind him, David refuses to shake his hand. And that's as far as we get
doesn't know where it's been.
with that this week.
What the hell were they doing at Freshco's? Seriously. It looked like they were going to go in there and, rob the place. And it's like, you guys should be,
Shopping locally?
50, 60 miles away by now.
Yeah.
You murdered your brother.
They know that...
They are so stupid.
Yeah.
This is the thing about these guys. They're supposed to be so threatening, but they're also so stupid.
They're so stupid. And the stabbing was by accident. It almost looked like Mason ran into the knife.
Right, yeah. It's like Deck pushed him and pushed him into Ant.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, his two brothers did collectively kill him, but completely by accident.
Yeah. But they know what they did.
Right. Because they dropped...
And they maybe shouldn't go to Freshco's the next day.
Right, yeah. Because they've hid the knife
Poorly.
in the garbage.
I thought they
poorly.
just dropped it in the gunnel.
They dropped it, yeah. But obviously they went back and they hid it afterwards before anything else could happen.
Kit trying to clear the air with David was a brave move, but that's never going to work for David. He needs some retribution for this.
Right, yeah. He needs to beat Kit unconscious in a boxing ring.
Or at Jenga. One of the two.
One of the two. Just not in New York City.
In 2002. Correct. It was a nice detail that we didn't need to see the argument that happened between David and Shona, but when we saw David and Shona, or when we saw David at the scene of the stabbing, you're thinking that he's there for a reason because of what happened to Kylie.
Right.
And I always appreciate it. I'm sure everyone feels the same way when the show remembers these links to things and uses them properly.
Yeah. And that's why that's one of the reasons why he reacts the way he does.
Yeah, obviously.
To Lily.
Yeah. Yep. So it's good that they do that.
Yeah. But there's also this whole association with Ant and Deck as well.
Yeah.
It is interesting, though, the whole olive branch from Kit, because let's not forget, Kit went to Ant and Deck and said, all right, you can beat the snot out of David Platt now. He no longer has my protection. And now he's, wanting to shake his hand and say, let's bygones be bygones, and also offering police protection.
It seems that there is a line definitely with Kit where if you don't cross it, you can do whatever the hell you like.
Right.
I would prefer it if I would make some money out of this.
Right.
Or it benefits me in some way. But when you cross the line, it's like Kit has to be a policeman at that point.
Right.
And you could see throughout all the entanglement that he's had with Swain on and off, how it looks like he's trying to set Swain up sometimes. He's definitely demeaning her.
Yeah.
He's definitely trying to get her job.
Right.
But when push came to shove...
And it's tough because you don't know if he's a misogynist or if he's homophobic.
But when push comes to shove...
He's there.
And he's doing his job.
Right.
And he's chasing down villains.
Yes.
It's not what you really expect all that much from your corrupt policeman, I don't think.
And also, he's being a good uncle to Joseph.
He was a great uncle to Joseph.
But he's also not letting Joseph off the hook. He could very easily have said, all right, well, I'm glad you told me. Let's just keep this between ourselves. Don't do it again, and letting him go. But that's not what happened.
No. No, he did the right thing,
did
and he
the
was a
right
great
thing.
uncle because of it.
Absolutely.
Oh,
And
he's an enigma.
And he's very, very gentle with Joseph during that whole thing.
Tells him that in no way did you kill anybody.
Right.
Get that out of your mind.
Right.
Yeah.
But you also did a very bad thing. And there are consequences.
And one of those consequences is you're going to have to talk to Tinker.
Right. Yeah. And then apologize to Kev for some reason.
Right. All right, our final storyline tonight is My Heroine.
Well played.
On Wednesday, Abby is pretending that she's fine by trying to scrub the blood out of her things. Kev suggests getting breakfast at Nina's Rolls, which is his way of showing concern. He thinks Abby should speak to someone, but she insists that she's fine, and she isn't going to fall off the wagon or anything. But when she drops Kev's scrambled eggs, she admits that she's not fine, and she breaks down on his shoulder. This also means that Kev gets his way, and they go to the cafe for breakfast after all, where they run into Sally and Tim.
Yes.
Kev thinks it was a matter of time before Mason's criminal past got up with him, and Tim looks like he wants to punch Kev in the throat.
Yes, and so do I.
Back home.
Like, fuck you. What the hell? It's not like you have a squeaky clean past there, Mr. Kevin Webster. That is your real name.
Oh, the people he's punched.
Seriously.
Back home, Abby is listening to the radio news talking about the stabbing, but hears that it was Seb who was stabbed as the camera goes Dutch angle and funny noises happen. Kev, who has had breakfast at Nina's Rolls today, fucks off to the chippy for dinner while Abby promises Alfie that she'll never let anything bad happen to him. On Friday, Abby's at the precinct with Alfie on the swings when she sees Adam leaving Dylan's in another storyline, and she wants to know why the fuck he would need a solicitor. And Dylan admits that he was
the owner of the knife.
Dylan admits that it was his knife, and that infuriates Abby until she realises that Alfie's done a runner when her back was turned, and after her saying that she wouldn't let anything bad happen to him only yesterday.
Yeah.
She blames Dylan for this, and as she goes off on one, Alfie turns up with Toya, who found him wandering or hiding behind a car
He was
or
hiding
something.
behind a car because supposedly they were playing hide and seek.
But rather than being relieved, she accuses Toya of trying to steal her kid. Toya,
And this is why it's Toya who brings the kid back.
Yes. you see?
Yes. Yes, because you see, Toya was married to I was going to say Frankie,
To Imran.
to Alfie's dad, Imran. Yes, and also Toya has a history of stealing babies.
She has mild baby stealing syndrome. Toya asks if she's okay, and it's in this kind of first person weird angle.
Right, yeah, and
There's
then
kind of
things kind of go
streaks,
fuzzy and...
there's echoes in the
Oh,
background. and
I
stuff.
hate
I
that.
don't like it. Abby tells her to stay the fuck away from her family. At home, Kev has found out from Toya about what happened, which Abby thinks is an attempt to paint her as an unfit mother, but she's never going to get her hands on my kid, you hear? Never. Kev's more worried about his stomach and getting changed, and so lets it go.
And says, let's go get a chippy.
But later outside, Abby has a psychotic episode where she sees Mason holding the header, and she breaks down while the cameraman gets all fancy with his Dutch angles again, and that is how we end this week's episode. Oh my god, it's a disappointing end to the week.
Yes, it is. It is. It's very disappointing because why the hell can't they leave Karla and Abby alone? Why does the show have to? And now they're messing with Karla and Abby's health at the same time.
Yes.
What the hell? Usually it's one or the other that is having psychotic breaks.
It's psychotic tag team.
Right, yes. But now Karla's had a psychotic break, but only because she has sepsis. And now Abby is having a psychotic break because of PTSD, because Seb and because Mason. And because she, of course, had to be the one to find him, because of course she did. Because the show hates women. Oh my God, I hate this. I hate it so much. And I hate the way that they do it with like the whole fuzzy camera thing and everything. It's like, it's unnecessary. Being gimmicky is unnecessary. Just tell a story and tell it straight. As my old friend Emily Dickinson used to say.
Didn't she say tell it slant?
She did.
Yeah. Don't try and pull that fish for me, Broom.
Yes, and it was also not Ernest Hemingway who wrote.
Oh, don't
From
pick
Here
at
to
that.
Eternity.
Don't you pick at that, Scab. I still haven't forgiven you for that.
I'm still trying tried to think about which Ernest Hemingway novel I was thinking of. With the nurse and the World War I. Oh, well. I see, this is why we hate Daniel.
Yeah, because we are him. Somebody on Twitter posted, I was trying to find it there, and I can't quite get it, and I can't remember exactly who it was that said it, so I do apologise, but someone said that of all the people who have died on Coronation Street over the last couple of years or so, you know, Rufus Houndstooth, Stephen, now Mason,
Leo's dad,
Cinco Leo,
the other Ted. We had two dead Teds.
Apart from the other Ted.
Two dead Teds.
And Shelley, remember Shelley?
Yes.
All of them have returned in apparition. And Paul.
Yes.
All of them have returned apart from Shelley.
Yeah.
Which is a strange thing to make a thing. That once you die on the show, you usually come back at least once or twice after
As a
that.
ghostie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because ghosts are a thing.
And even that guy that tried to kill Gail and the Platt children came back as a ghostie last week. Was it last week or was it the week before? Time has no meaning. And he was all soggy and had seaweed in his hair, like he was in the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, old Davy Jones that was married to Gail.
Gail.
Richard Tillman.
Yes, that guy.
Yeah, I thought it was a slightly disappointing end, because when this sort of thing happens to Abby, two things typically happen. Mm-hmm. She goes off to get a hold with somebody else, and she gets back on the muck again.
Right.
And I think we've had enough of both of those things.
Yes. Although we also do want her and Kev to break up, because Kev is terrible.
And because
Or
of the
maybe
way
that's
that
just
the
me.
show spoils things and tells us who's leaving and all that stuff ahead of time, we know that the Websters are in for a fairly shitty year this year.
Right. And a big ass storyline where a brother comes back.
This seems like an unnecessary complication added into that.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about it. I do think that it's great that we're seeing more of Abby. It's been a while since she's been front and centre.
Yeah, but then they're giving her basically another PTSD psychotic break storyline where she may be going back on the muck again.
It will, though.
And
I
also
imagine.
Seb.
It will, I imagine, give us plenty of scenes where Kev shouts Abby.
Right, yes.
And that will add to my collection of such.
And also victim blames Abby constantly.
Tell her that she's hit a new low.
Right, yes.
That's a good thing to tell your wife.
Oh,
This
God,
is a new low, Abby.
I hate him so much. I hate him so much.
No, and when we add all these storylines together, with the exception of the Evelyn one, I think, most, if not all of this, is born out of that one incident.
Yes.
And I love that about this week's show.
Yes, that's the thing that I like about it, is that it touches everybody in different ways.
Monday was very much from Mason's point of view. And then from the instant he died, these other storylines were born out of that. And I think that's great. All of this as a community storyline is exactly what I was talking about.
Yes.
As being something that the show needs. It needs these storylines just like it needs the fun storylines, the table football, the walking football thing that didn't really develop as much as I would have liked. But having a storyline that doesn't really have any consequence and can be done and dusted in a week.
Right.
It's super important to have. And Corrie used to do it all the time, and it doesn't do it anymore.
No.
So when it does do it, you really appreciate it. And when something like this happens where multiple characters are all involved in the one storyline and then it goes off in their own separate directions, this is fantastic.
Yeah, I love that. And it's one of the things that makes me even more pissed off about the things that I didn't like about this week, about the whole public service announcement as read by Tim, I almost called him Ted, and the whole, gimmicky way they told the story of Mason in the beginning, where kind of plays off like he's fine, and here he goes off. Oh, no, wait, we're pulling the rug out from under you. He's really been stabbed, because when they tell the story in a way that's not trying to use gimmicks or public service announcements to get an emotional pull from their audience, I think they're very, very effective. Because once we get away from the gimmickiness of Monday, the impact is felt all the way through the rest of the week. You know, the impact of what this kid had on the people of Coronation Street in big ways and in small ways, and how it touched so many different families in different ways, from Joseph and Hope being the ones who did the prank call to, you know, David being worried that Ant and Deck are going to come for him next.
And to Liam.
Right.
And Maria and Gary.
Right. And then Dylan and Sean, and Dylan slowly coming to accept his responsibility in all of this. You know, that's good storytelling. You don't need gimmicks. Just tell the story and trust your audience.
The one thing is, though, this is very much in line with what Kate Brooks told us is what excites her about storytelling, is telling stories in a non-linear fashion. Stunt storytelling, she called it. The issue-led stuff. This fits those bills absolutely. And I get where you're coming from with the Mason's okay, oh no he's not, but I understand where you're coming from. I did almost like how they did that because of the effect that it had on me, on making me think one thing and then another thing being true, and how it kind of played with my emotions a little bit.
It's manipulative.
It is a manipulative, but I don't mind it. And how I could imagine this is the sort of thing that you think about in that situation. I could imagine that this would be hallucinations that you have. And the reason that I think that is because I kind of wrote that. And there's a little bit of
You think
Abby saying, "You all right?"
Yeah.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
That little motif of somebody saying the same thing
Over and over
and over again.
While you're dying, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of did that in the Scottish Book of the Dead. But anyway.
You did. A published book that anybody could have bought and read on both sides of the Atlantic.
That had earthquakes and sinkholes in it. But anyway.
Right, yes. Remember the sinkholes.
I don't think this.
If a sandhill crane shows up in this show, I'm going to sue.
Talking in a Scottish accent.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think these things, but I think the way that they portrayed it felt like something I could believe. So it didn't bother me as much, but I can understand why it wasn't everybody's cup of tea. Absolutely, because it does feel like you're not being honest with the audience a little bit.
Right.
But no, I thought it was a great week, all in all. I didn't think it was perfect. I don't know that a perfect Coronation Street week exists, but
right.
I thought this was pretty good. Well, that was the week. That was Coronation Street then. Helen, tell me, what was your moment of the week?
Is it Dylan finally accepting that Sean did the right thing
No.
by grassing him up? And I'm saying, yeah, you're okay for a dad. Or is it Dylan's like emotional breakdown when he realizes that Mason is dead?
I also don't think it's got anything to do with Dylan.
Really? Because I thought Dylan was like really good this week.
Yeah, I thought Mason was better though.
Mason.
And remember, we didn't give moment of the week to Mason one week because we'd given it to him like within the last couple of weeks.
Right.
And the next week he dies.
Is it Swain kind of breaking down and holding back?
I did like that an awful lot.
When Abby is hugging Betsy and then going and taking over comforting Betsy. That was a really good scene. I liked how they filmed it where she saw her and she knows immediately what this means.
Oh, she's seen these reactions before, right?
Right, yeah. And she holds back and she wipes her eyes. because it seems like she's finally reached a point. She just reached a point where she recognizes that no, Mason didn't know what his brothers did and is trying to help and is actually a good kid. And then he's dead.
I'm also wondering if she's feeling a little bit of guilt because...
Yeah, I'm sure she is.
Because she put Mason on to finding stuff out about her brother, about his
right,
brothers.
yeah.
So, yeah, I can live with that.
Yeah.
That's our...
Moment of the week.
Moment of the week.
Your boring moment of the week.
Oofed.
Oh, a tough one this week. For boring moment of the week, that's a tough one.
Yeah, Daniel and Ken were not in it this week. And
Chesney
Chesney wasn't
but he
boring.
wasn't boring.
Chesney wasn't boring this week. Is it Evelyn complaining about Gabriel Garcia Marquez?
No.
What is it?
It's Hope in our fucking TikToks. Hated that. And I know she's meant to be annoying in that
Gran, watch
scene.
me do this TikTok dance.
Fuck off, Hope.
Yeah, and then asking her for toast. Like, you can't make toast, Hope? You can't make your own fucking toast, really?
Seriously.
How old are you? 13?
Yeah.
Oh, Hope. Hope's first boring moment of the
I
week.
think it is Hope's first boring moment of the week.
So sad. How the mighty have fallen.
We'll all remember where we were, said Marilyn Monroe.
Boring moment of
I believe that was Abraham Lincoln.
At this point in the proceedings, I like to ask our Twitter followers what they thought of this week's episodes in a section that we're now calling
Yay!
Really? What's that? Nuh.
I had a spare 40 seconds. So we ask our Twitter followers what they thought of this week's episodes by ranking it either yay, meh, or zzz. I was a day earlier than usual, pestering people for their thoughts, but they responded in this manner. Zzz was 13%, meh was 11.6%, and yay was a resounding 75.4%. Sharon Emo says, a lot better this week. After the tragedy on Monday, the following episodes have shown a lot of warmth and community spirit, especially on Friday. And then reading the news that Jonathan Harvey is returning to the writing team makes me hopeful that the heart of Corrie can be saved. And Holly writes, only watched Monday so far, but was much more moved than I expected to be. Managed to miss the outcome of the Mason bit. And yeah, even from this ep alone, it's a good week. But hey, we don't let those scores or comments sway our opinion. Of course we don't, Helen. So what is your score out of 10, please?
7.
I'll give it an 8. I think I'll give it an 8.
Yeah.
7.5, 8. I'm going to be generous though. It's an 8.
Yeah. For me, it would have been an 8 without the Tim line reading of the PSA, the poster in the police station saying knives take lives.
Well, I thought that was important for Joseph.
It wasn't there on Monday, and then it's there the very next day.
Well, I wonder what happened.
And also, you know, the gimmicky way Mason died.
Yeah, I'm removing Tim's monologue from my memory. It didn't happen. All right, we'll wrap this one up then. This episode was brought to you with thanks to our friends of the podcast: Daisy, French Helen, Pickles, DT, Wendy, Noel, Canadian Helen, Christy, Shandy, English Victoria, Aurora Yvonne, Heather Westerfield, Russell Whiting, Jackie B, Brittany Porter, Laurie Anna, Tina, Stephen, Leah, Tara J, and Fiona B. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
If you've ever seen Mason through a Dutch angle, write in to tell us about it. We're the talkofthestreet@gmail.com, and we're at Corrie Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky, or reach us the old-fashioned way.
Yes.
Talk of the Street, P.O. Box 12, Eaton Rapids, Michigan 48827. You can shout me and Helen a coffee or become a friend of the podcast by heading to ko-fi.com, that's ko-fi.com/thetalkofthestreet, or patreon.com/thetalkofthestreet. Check out voggle.co.uk for links to our merch store, YouTube channel, and blog. And if you're so inclined, please leave a rating and a review on iTunes or your podcast provider of choice. And be sure to check out our pop culture sister podcast, The List of Lists.
We haven't done it yet this week. Oops.
Thanks for making it to the end. Oopsie. Thanks for making it to the end of another episode. And we'll be back next week with more
Talk of the Street.
Talk of the Street.
Bye.
Cheerio.